So now we construct a new measure for calculating the moving average at the quarterly frequency. So we're going to construct this measure under historical daily table. So let's click on this table under the data pane. Then we go to the data tools, new measure, and I'm going to paste my DAX code here. So this measure is called MA_YQ, which stands for the moving average for each year quarter. So the structure of this measure, the definition, okay, is very similar to the measure to calculate the moving average for each month. Okay, so the first step, we're using this filter function to take out rows from historical daily, which corresponds to the last trading day of a quarter. We don't take all the rows from this historical daily table. We only take those last trading days of a given quarter. Okay, so this filter function will take the original data set, historical daily, and apply this filter condition. Okay, so this filter condition is basically related to that calculated column called EOQ1. That column will take a value of 1 if that row relates to the last trading day of a quarter. Okay, so basically we're just taking out from this historical daily table all the rows related to the last trading days of each quarter. Okay, and here the all function, we discussed it before. It helps to remove all the filter context associated with a zero. Here we want to use the entire historical daily table, okay, without any filter context from zero. So that's why we use the all function here. And the next step, we're going to define a parameter for how long a window we're going to take to calculate the moving average. So 12 is a common choice. So in the third step, we're going to use the window function to work on this EOP table. EOP table was constructed previously in the first step. It contains the last trading day of each quarter. And because of that, EOP table is basically a quarterly table. Each row represents a particular quarter, and each row just contains the last trading day of a quarter. So based on the current row in the EOP table, we can retrieve the 12 quarters or 12 rows prior to the current row. Okay, and that 12 rows are going to be stored in this variable called W. All right, then in the fourth step, we're going to take these 12 rows row by row. Okay, the average X function is going to work on this table W, one row at a time, and the function is going to take the adjusted closing price on each row, and after scanning this adjusted closing price for those 12 rows, the average X function is going to take the average of those 12 values. Okay, so that's basically the average price over the 12 quarters prior to the current quarter. So once we finish the definition of this moving average at the quarterly frequency, I'll just click on enter, and we'll have this new measure here. And now we can again construct a line chart showing this moving average over each quarter. So we're going to use the year quarter under the Bravo date table as the x-axis. All right, and we're still using the last adjusted close, this measure, for the y-axis. So this last adjusted close is basically showing the closing price at the end of each quarter. All right, then lastly, because we have already constructed this moving average, we can just kind of drag it to be again part of the y-axis. So this darker blue line is showing the moving average for the 12 quarters prior to the current quarter. Okay, so when the measure definition try to calculate the value for this measure, it needs to look at the filter context on the zero. So for example, if we are currently standing at this point, looking at this quarter 3 of 2024, so that's a particular point on the x-axis. And this quarter 3 2024 is going to work as a filter context. Okay, That's how the window function knows what's the current row we're working at in the EOP table, okay? Because this point corresponds to the third quarter of 2024, then the current row in EOP is going to be the third quarter of 2024, okay? So in here, the current row in EOP is going to be related to the third quarter of 2024. Then the window function is going to retrieve 12 quarters prior to the third quarter of 2024 and store that in this W table. So that's how we retrieve the 12 quarters prior to the current quarter. When we say the current quarter is determined by the data point on the barrel, basically the particular quarter on the x-axis, okay? If we're standing at quarter 4 of 2024, again, the current row should be the row in the EOP table related to the fourth quarter of 2024. Then the window function is going to work to retrieve the 12 rows prior to quarter 4 of 2024 and store that in the variable W, okay? And lastly, the average x function is going to work on those 12 quarters prior to the current quarter. Again, assuming the current quarter is quarter 4 of 2024, then the W table is going to contain the 12 quarters prior to the quarter 4 of 2024. And the average x function is going to use those 12 quarters, take the closing price in those 12 quarters, and calculate the average of those 12 values, okay? And eventually, this average closing price in the prior 12 quarters is going to return to be the value for this measure.